Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I had always been healthy, but the first sign that something was wrong came when I started experiencing strange numbness in my legs. I ignored it at first, thinking it was just from sitting too long at my desk. But then the headaches started. Not your regular headaches, but the kind that made me see stars. After 3 months of increasingly concerning symptoms, I finally went to my doctor. One MRI led to another, and suddenly, I was being admitted to the hospital for extensive testing. The scan showed multiple lesions on my brain and spine. The doctors suspected an autoimmune condition, but they needed more tests to be sure. I remember sitting in my hospital bed that first night, scrolling through medical websites on my phone until the nurse gently suggested I try to get some sleep instead. I was handling it as well as anyone could, I suppose. On the outside, I looked perfectly normal, still dressed in my usual casual clothes, still able to walk and talk normally. The only visible sign that something might be wrong was my glasses, which I'd worn for years due to nearsightedness. My co-workers had been supportive when I told them about the tests, but I could see the confusion in their eyes. How could someone who looked so normal be potentially seriously ill? As part of the testing process, they sent me to the ophthalmology department to check my optic nerve. The hospital corridors were a maze, and I had to ask for directions twice before finding the right department. When I arrived, there were 2 doctors in the room, an older one in the back writing notes and doing paperwork, and a younger one who would be examining me. The room smelled strongly of disinfectant and had that distinct medical feel, with its white walls and gleaming equipment. The young doctor asked me to take a seat and inquired about the reason for my glasses. I responded casually, saying it was just nearsightedness. I probably shouldn't have used the word just. I was already nervous about all the testing, and this was just one more appointment in what felt like an endless series of medical visits. That's when everything went sideways. The young doctor's face changed completely, like I had just insulted her entire profession. She launched into a heated speech about how there was no such thing as just nearsightedness, insisting it was a serious condition that could lead to severe complications. Her voice grew increasingly passionate, and I could tell this was something she felt strongly about. For the next 10 minutes, yes, 10 whole minutes, she lectured me about the dangers of nearsightedness. She went on and on about retinal detachment, glaucoma, and how I needed to take my condition more seriously. I sat there politely, thinking she must have read my file and was incorporating this into the bigger picture of my condition. My hands were starting to sweat, and I kept looking at the older doctor in the back, wondering if he was going to intervene. She was in the middle of explaining how I could lose my vision entirely when she finally paused to look at my medical file. The room went silent as she read about the brain lesions, the spine lesions, and the real reason I was there, to check my optic nerve for signs of neurological damage. The only sound was the gentle hum of the equipment and the ticking of the wall clock. I watched as all the color drained from her face. Her mouth opened and closed a few times, but no words came out. The older doctor in the back had stopped shuffling papers and was watching the scene unfold. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a scalpel. Her voice completely changed when she finally spoke again. Gone was the lecturing tone, replaced by quiet, professional, almost apologetic instructions to put my chin on the rest and look straight ahead. She continued with simple directions. Look up, look down, follow the light, all delivered in near silence. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the equipment. The older doctor eventually came over to double-check some findings, giving me a sympathetic look. I could tell he was trying to smooth over the awkward situation with his calm demeanor and gentle movements. When I left the office, I heard the older doctor clear his throat, followed by the young doctor's embarrassed mumbling in response. I felt a tiny bit of satisfaction. I sat in my car for a few minutes afterward, processing what had just happened, torn between amusement and exhaustion. The young doctor had probably seen hundreds of patients with nearsightedness and maybe she was trying to be thorough. But that day, she learned an important lesson about making assumptions and jumping to conclusions before reviewing a patient's full medical history. I wondered how many other patients she had lectured similarly and whether this experience would change her approach. Later that week, when I returned to the hospital for more tests, I saw her in the hallway. She quickly turned and walked the other way, nearly bumping into a nurse in her haste to avoid me. Now she had started making it a point to read patient files thoroughly before beginning any examination. The nurse even mentioned that the young doctor had brought up the incident during a staff meeting, using it as an example of why proper preparation was crucial. I've been having a rough month. My cat of 12 years passed away recently, and I've been trying to cope with the loss by throwing myself into work. I'm a veterinary technician, and helping other animals somehow helps me deal with my grief. Today was quite difficult. We had to put down an elderly cat that reminded me so much of mine. After my shift ended, I decided to stop by the local bakery. They make these amazing New York-style cheesecakes that always lifted my spirits. As I walked in, I overheard one of the staff mention they only had one slice left for the day. Perfect timing. I quickly made my way to the display case, and there it was, the last slice, looking absolutely divine. As I was paying for it, I heard someone clear their throat aggressively behind me. She rudely exclaimed that she was going to buy that slice. I apologized but explained that I had just paid for it. She demanded that I unpay for it, claiming she needed that cheesecake and that she'd been coming there every Tuesday for the past 3 years, suggesting the slice was practically hers by default. I explained again that it doesn't work that way since I'd already purchased it. She then went on about how her daughter got straight A's this semester, and she had promised her this specific cheesecake as a reward. She accused me of ruining her daughter's achievement. The staff behind the counter tried to help by telling her they'd have fresh cheesecakes tomorrow morning. She angrily refused, demanding to have it right then and there. I took my purchase and started walking toward the exit. That's when things got weird. She followed me, yelling about how selfish I was and how I was teaching children that being greedy is okay. I quickened my pace to my car, but she kept following. As I tried to leave, she shouted that I couldn't just walk away and that she wasn't done talking to me. I reached my car and quickly got in, placing the cheesecake on the passenger seat. She stood right behind my car, preventing me from backing out. After a minute of this standoff, I called the non-emergency police line to report harassment. That's when she completely lost it. She walked to the side of my car and, to everyone's horror in the parking lot, started deliberately banging her head against my driver's side window. Not just once, multiple times. She started screaming for help, claiming I was attacking her and trying to kill her, begging someone to call the police. By this point, a small crowd had gathered, phones out, recording everything. Blood was trickling down her face from where she'd hit her head, and she was swaying slightly. She kept yelling at the crowd, insisting they had all witnessed me attacking her and pleading with them to call 911. Several people did call emergency services, but not for the reason she wanted. I could hear them clearly describing how she had followed me and injured herself. Within minutes, police and an ambulance arrived. She immediately launched into a dramatic performance, telling the officers she was grateful they arrived and demanding they arrest me for assault, pointing at all the blood as evidence. That's when I mentioned I had the entire incident recorded on my dash cam. Her face went pale. She clearly hadn't noticed the camera. The police reviewed the footage right there, and things got even better when several witnesses came forward with their phone recordings. The paramedics tried to examine her head, but she kept pushing them away, suddenly insisting she was fine. But it was too late. She had already claimed assault and injury, so they had to do a proper examination. The police arrested her for harassment, filing a false police report, and damaging my car. She had actually dented the door panel with her head. One of the witnesses turned out to be a manager from her workplace. Apparently, she was supposed to be at work during all of this, having called in sick that day. The manager was just picking up some pastries for the office when they witnessed the whole scene. 2 weeks later, I received notice that she was being charged with multiple offenses lost her job and had to pay for the damages to my car. The bakery also banned her permanently and now saves me a slice of cheesecake every Tuesday. Though I never asked them to do that. They just thought it was the least they could do after what happened. I'm a single mom to my beautiful 2-year-old daughter, who was diagnosed with autism last year. After my husband passed away from cancer, I had to switch jobs to something that would give me more time with my little one. I found this perfect position at a logistics company that allowed me to work from home 3 days a week. The only challenge was finding proper childcare for my daughter. After months of searching, I finally found this place called Family Building Blocks that claimed to specialize in caring for children with special needs. They had great reviews, offered transportation, and seemed to have experienced staff. It felt like a miracle. For the first 2 months, everything went smoothly. The bus would pick up my daughter at 8 a.m. and she'd return home at 2 p.m. The driver and attendants seemed caring and professional. But yesterday changed everything. It was a cold morning around 36 degrees. I bundled up my daughter in her favorite pink coat, gave her the usual goodbye hug, and watched as she boarded the bus with 7 other children. There were 4 staff members present, 2 attendants, the driver, and what appeared to be a supervisor. As I watched her board the bus, I called out my usual goodbye, telling her I loved her and to have a great day. She waved back at me through the window. Little did I know that would be the start of a nightmare. At 11:30 a.m., I received a call that made my blood run cold. The driver called to tell me there had been an incident. When I asked if my daughter was okay, they hesitantly explained that they had just found her on the bus. I couldn't understand what they meant by found her and asked where she was supposed to be. That's when they admitted she had been left strapped in her seat when they unloaded the other children that morning. My heart stopped. 3 hours. My baby had been left alone on a cold bus for 3 hours. When they started talking about conducting an internal investigation, I cut them off and told them I was calling the police. I rushed to the center, breaking every speed limit on the way. When I arrived, I found my daughter confused, hungry, and sitting in an unchanged diaper. She was shivering despite being wrapped in a blanket that one of the staff members had given her. The center's director tried to handle the situation by expressing regret and mentioning they were reviewing their protocols. I pointed out that they had 4 adults responsible for only 8 children, demanding to know how they could possibly miss a child. The director tried to defend themselves by suggesting these things can happen, but I told them that no, these things don't just happen, and that this was criminal negligence. I immediately called the police and filed a report. Then I contacted a lawyer who specialized in cases involving children with special needs. Turns out I wasn't the first parent to have issues with this center, just the first one with such a serious incident. The investigation revealed that not only had they failed to do the required bus check, but they had also falsified the morning attendance records to show my daughter was present in class. The driver and attendants were fired, the center's license was suspended pending a full investigation, and my lawyer is building a case that will ensure this never happens to another child. I found out through a former employee that the center had been cutting corners on their safety protocols for months, and my incident finally exposed them. They're now facing multiple investigations from different agencies, and other parents are coming forward with their own stories. My daughter is now at a new center, one that actually follows proper safety protocols and truly cares for children with special needs. I'm making it my mission to push for stricter regulations and better oversight of special needs childcare facilities. I was diagnosed as autistic when I was 6 years old, though my mother never believed me when I said I was sick or in pain. She had this twisted logic that because I was autistic, I was hypersensitive to discomfort and would exaggerate everything. The reality was actually the opposite. I had a higher pain tolerance than most people. When I was 12, she let me suffer through walking pneumonia for over a month before I finally saw a doctor. That was just one instance of many where she dismissed my health concerns. I couldn't take it anymore, so I ran away from home when I was 15. I spent the next few years having little to no contact with my parents. At 18, I moved back to a town near my hometown. I thought maybe enough time had passed that I could try rebuilding a relationship with my mother. I was living alone in a small apartment, still figuring out how to be an adult. One night, I experienced the most severe stomach pain I'd ever felt. I was vomiting and couldn't even stand straight. Initially, I dismissed it as just an upset stomach from eating too close to bedtime, which happened to me sometimes. But throughout the night, the pain got worse, and I developed a fever. I knew something was seriously wrong, but I'd never called emergency services before, and I was new to the area. I was scared I might be overreacting, so instead of calling an ambulance, I decided to call my mother on the landline. I could barely walk to the phone, screaming in pain with each step. When she answered, I struggled to tell her through the pain that something was seriously wrong and I needed help. She responded with skepticism, asking what was wrong this time in an exasperated tone. I tried to explain about my stomach, but the pain was so intense I could barely speak. I managed to hear her say she was coming before I passed out mid-conversation. Thankfully, my downstairs neighbors must have heard either my screams or the sound of me crashing into the kitchen table. They called an ambulance, which arrived just before my mother did. As the paramedics were assessing me on the floor, my mother burst in, looking annoyed at the ambulance's presence. She immediately started telling the paramedics that they didn't need to be there. She explained that I was autistic and had a habit of exaggerating my pain for attention. She insisted that I frequently faked health problems. The paramedics looked uncertain, looking between me and my mother. One of them asked if I really thought I needed to go to the hospital. Despite my mother's interference, I managed to insist that something was really wrong and I needed medical attention. At the hospital, everything changed when my blood work came back. The medical staff rushed me for an immediate CT scan. The doctor explained that my appendix hadn't just been inflamed, it had completely ruptured. The sudden relief from pain I'd felt when passing out was actually the rupture happening. I needed emergency surgery, and I was at high risk for sepsis. The doctor explained to us that if I hadn't come to the hospital when I did, the situation could have been fatal. He emphasized that sepsis from a ruptured appendix was extremely serious. My mother stood there, her face growing paler with each word. My mother started crying, finally realizing that if she'd had her way, if my neighbors hadn't called that ambulance, I might have died. The surgery had to be done with an open incision instead of laparoscopically, and I spent several days recovering in the hospital. After that incident, my mother's attitude changed dramatically. Almost too dramatically. She became hyper-vigilant about my health, calling constantly to check on me if she heard I had so much as a cold. During my hospital stay, I overheard her talking to one of the nurses. She was sobbing, confessing how she'd almost lost her daughter because she wouldn't listen. The nurse tried to comfort her, saying that sometimes we have to learn lessons the hard way, and the important thing was that she was learning them. My mother's response was heartbreaking. She couldn't stop thinking about all the times she hadn't believed me, questioning what kind of mother doesn't believe their own child. Our relationship is still strained, but that incident was a turning point. She finally had to face the consequences of her dismissive behavior, and it scared her straight. These days, she not only takes my health concerns seriously, but also my other needs and boundaries. It took nearly losing me for her to realize that being autistic doesn't make my pain any less real. I had just finished nursing school and was working my first year at the local hospital. My grandmother had been my biggest supporter throughout my education. She'd even helped me pay for my textbooks when money was tight. She lived just a few hours away, and I'd visit her every other weekend. We'd spend hours talking about my patients and how much I was learning. She always said she was proud that I was following in her footsteps, as she had been a nurse during World War II. That day, I had just finished a lovely morning with my boyfriend, now husband, when I got the call from my mother. My grandmother had suffered a sudden heart attack. Despite being rushed to the hospital, she didn't make it. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. I needed some time to process everything, so I decided to walk home instead of calling a cab. The walk was about 30 minutes, and I spent most of it trying to hold myself together. I kept thinking about how I was supposed to visit her that weekend. how he had plans to go through her old photo albums. Now those plans would never happen. I was almost home when I passed this overweight man standing on his doorstep. What happened next still makes my blood boil. He called out to me, demanding that I smile for him. When I politely declined, he persisted, telling me to cheer up because it might never happen. I responded curtly that he was too late for that. Still not taking the hint, he continued to harass me, suggesting that I would look prettier if I smiled. At this point, I snapped. I explained to him that I had just received news of my grandmother's death half an hour ago, and I was barely keeping myself from crying. I told him how I thought I was doing an okay job of keeping my grief hidden, but apparently not, and sarcastically apologized for my facial expression offending him and not being pretty enough for his viewing pleasure. Instead of showing any remorse, he had the audacity to tell me to calm down and claim there was no need for me to react that way. This only fueled my anger further. I asked him if he was joking, pointing out that I was just trying to mind my own business while he was the one who decided to tell a complete stranger, a grieving woman no less, that her face wasn't good enough for him. He tried to defend himself by saying he didn't know about my situation and was just trying to be friendly. This gave me the perfect opportunity to make my point. I explained that was exactly the problem. He didn't know because he was a complete stranger, and my emotions and face were none of his business. I suggested that next time he sees someone looking miserable, he should consider that they might have a good reason for it and leave them alone. I also advised him that if he doesn't like looking at someone's face, he should try looking somewhere else instead of sharing his unwanted opinion. I finished by calling him an absolute moron. All he could manage in response was a mumbled apology, still calling me love even then. As I walked away, I heard his front door slam shut. Through my peripheral vision, I could see several of his neighbors standing in their gardens, having witnessed the entire exchange. One elderly woman even gave me an approving nod as I passed by. I finally made it home and broke down crying. Later that evening, my boyfriend came over with takeout and comfort movies. While we were sitting on the couch, he told me that the incident had apparently become the talk of the neighborhood. The man's wife had been home the whole time and heard everything through their open window. According to local gossip, she gave him quite an earful about his behavior, and he was now the subject of considerable ridicule among the neighbors. It all started when I lost my office job. With a mortgage to pay and bills piling up, I needed to think outside the box. I had always enjoyed yard work. It was therapeutic, seeing the immediate results of your labor. So I bought some basic equipment and started offering my services locally. The turning point came when I helped an elderly veteran with his yard for free. His gratitude was genuine, and it got me thinking, what if I could help people while also making content that could support me? That's how my channel was born. I'd find properties with overgrown yards, offer free mowing services in exchange for letting me record the transformation and share these stories online. It worked better than I ever imagined. Last week I spotted this modest house with an obviously neglected yard. The grass was knee-high, and you could tell it hadn't been maintained in months. I knocked on the door, and this sweet elderly lady answered. She must have been in her mid-80s. I introduced myself and explained my offer to help with her yard for free in exchange for recording the transformation for my channel. The old lady looked at me with a mix of suspicion and hope. She told me how she'd been trying to find someone affordable, but everyone charged too much these days. She mentioned her arthritis prevented her from doing it herself anymore. I assured her that I genuinely wanted to help people, and that the videos helped support my work. When I asked if she was interested, she eagerly agreed, but double-checked if I really didn't want any payment. I confirmed that all I needed was permission to record the transformation. I spent the next 4 hours working on her yard. The transformation was incredible, from an overgrown mess to a perfectly manicured lawn. The old lady kept bringing me water and couldn't stop thanking me. The video went viral, getting millions of views in just a few days. I decided to visit her again to share some of the earnings since the video did so well. When I arrived, she was sitting on her porch. I thanked her for letting me share her yard transformation and and explained how well the video had done, offering to share some of the earnings with her. The old lady's eyes welled up with tears. She called me an angel and mentioned she had just been telling her neighbor about my kindness. That's when I heard the screen door of the neighboring house slam. This middle-aged woman came storming across the yard like a tornado. Karen started yelling at me, demanding that I do her yard next, right that moment. When I politely explained that I had other appointments but could check my schedule, she became even more aggressive. She insisted that since I did her neighbor's yard for free, I had to do hers too, claiming it was only fair. I tried to explain how I choose which yards to work on based on various factors, but before I could finish, she cut me off by shouting to her boys. She commanded her 2 adult sons to get my equipment. Before I could process what was happening, her sons jumped into the back of my truck and started roughly pulling out my expensive mowing equipment. I yelled at them to stop, explaining it was private property. Karen smugly retorted that if I wanted to play favorites, they would just take what they needed. I immediately called the police while recording everything on my phone. The sons had already damaged one of my mowers, getting it down, and were dragging it across their driveway. The police arrived within minutes. After taking statements and seeing my video evidence, they arrested Karen and her sons. She ended up serving 6 months in jail. Her sons got community service, 500 hours each of lawn maintenance for the local park district. The old lady still sends me cookies every time I visit to maintain her yard, which I now do regularly for free. Her yard transformation video hit 10 million views, and the follow-up video about the entitled neighbor incident got even more attention. The comment section was filled with people sharing their own stories about entitled neighbors. Karen's house is now the only one on the street with an unkempt yard, since no lawn service in town will work with her after the incident went viral. After working in tech support for over a decade, I finally landed a position as a systems engineer at a major corporation. The job came with a significant pay raise, which meant I could finally move out of my cramped studio apartment into something more comfortable. I found this nice 2-story apartment building in a quiet neighborhood, perfect for someone like me who often had to be up at 5 a.m. for early morning system maintenance. Everything was peaceful for the first 6 months until she moved in, a single mother with 2 teenage boys who lived in the unit above mine. From day one, she made it clear that she wasn't interested in being a considerate neighbor. When the moving company accidentally scratched her door, she screamed so loudly that the entire building could hear her. I asked if everything was all right, but she rudely told me to mind my own business and that she was handling it. That was my first interaction with her, and things only went downhill from there. Her boys would constantly run up and down the stairs, slam doors, and blast their video games at full volume. But I tried to be understanding. They were teenagers after all. One afternoon I was heading out to grab my mail when I saw her boys throwing water balloons from their balcony at passing cars. I called up to them, warning that they shouldn't be doing that as someone could get hurt. Karen stormed onto her balcony and started yelling at me for telling her boys what to do, claiming they were just having fun. When I pointed out they could cause an accident, she mockingly asked if I was an expert on parenting and made a snide comment about me not having any kids of my own. I decided to avoid confrontation after that, but things got significantly worse when summer vacation started. Her boys would stay up until 2 or 3 a.m. blasting music and watching movies at full volume. After 3 nights of barely getting any sleep, I went up to talk to them. I politely asked if they could turn down the volume since I needed to be up early for work. Karen immediately got defensive, stating that they paid rent just like me, and her boys deserved to enjoy their summer vacation. When I tried to mention the after 10 p.m. quiet hours, she threatened to call the police if I didn't stop harassing them. Left with no choice, I reported them to the complex security. The next day, I had to leave for a business trip to oversee a major system upgrade at one of our satellite offices. The project was supposed to take 2 weeks, but got extended due to some complications. When I returned 3 weeks later, there was an eviction notice on my door. Confused and angry, I gathered all my expense reports, hotel receipts, and travel documentation before heading to the leasing office. The agent told me that they'd received multiple noise complaints about my unit over the past month, and I had been unresponsive to all their notices. I explained that I'd been out of town and showed them all my travel receipts and expense reports. We were going through the dates when the property manager got a call. She told the agent that I was doing it again, saying the music was too loud. I pointed out that this was impossible since I was right there in the office and my apartment was empty. The agent, looking at my receipts, noted that according to these, I was in Denver when most of these complaints were filed. The three of us went to my apartment. Complete silence. Not even a clock ticking. The property manager looked embarrassed, and the agent was furious. Back at the office, they pulled up Karen's file. Turns out she had multiple warnings for various violations: unauthorized pets, late rent payments, and harassing other neighbors. They immediately revoked my eviction notice and served her with one instead. While reviewing the security footage to document her false complaints, they discovered she had been letting her boys sneak into the community pool after hours through a fence gap. That was the final nail in her coffin. Instead of a 14-day notice, she got a 72-hour eviction order for multiple lease violations. 3 days later, I watched from my window as she and her boys loaded their things into a moving truck, screaming about how unfair everything was and how she'd sue the complex. The property manager simply stood there, holding a thick folder of documented violations, security footage screenshots, and complaint records. The peaceful sound of silence never felt so sweet. I never planned to work at a theme park. My dream was to become a marine biologist, but life had other plans. After my dad lost his job and my mom's medical bills started piling up, I had to put college on hold. The theme park was hiring, offering decent pay and benefits, so I jumped at the opportunity. I started in the custodial department. I took pride in maintaining the park's cleanliness and helping guests find their way around. My supervisors noticed my efficiency and work ethic, always finishing my tasks ahead of schedule. Little did I know this would lead to an unexpected career change. One morning, my manager called me into his office. The resort's dining area was severely understaffed, particularly in the cashier department. Given my track record of quick learning and efficiency, they wanted me to train as a cashier. I wasn't thrilled about the change. Dealing with money and cranky guests wasn't exactly my idea of fun, but I couldn't really say no. They paired me with a trainer, an older guy who'd been working there for years. Despite his constant flirting and dad jokes, he was actually a great teacher. He had this way of making even the most tedious tasks seem entertaining. When I first arrived for training, he joked about this being cash register boot camp and told me not to cry too much. I played along, telling him I just wanted to get it over with. He laughed at my forced enthusiasm, saying it was perfect for starting the day. The register system was overwhelming at first. 5 pages of items, each containing dozens of products from different restaurants and the bakery store. My trainer assured me I'd eventually memorize everything, but looking at the endless list made me doubt that. They gave me a special tag that said, "I'm earning my ears to wear over my name tag." Most guests were understanding when they saw it. Some even offered encouragement, like this one nice guest who told me not to worry, saying everyone has to start somewhere and that I was doing great. I thanked her sincerely for her patience. Things were going smoothly until she arrived, a thin woman with a sharp nose and an even sharper attitude. She dumped a pile of items on my counter: food, souvenir mugs, decorative cups, and other merchandise I wasn't familiar with yet. My trainer had to help me locate different items in the system, which apparently was too much for her to handle. She demanded that I hurry up, saying that some people had lives. I apologized and explained that I was still in training, but she cut me off, saying she didn't care and had other things to do. Something in me snapped. If she wanted to be rude, I could play that game too. I picked up her first item, a souvenir mug, and examined it like I was studying an ancient artifact. Turning it over in my hands, I inspected every angle with exaggerated concentration. Each item got the same treatment. I moved with the speed of a tortoise taking a nap, maintaining direct eye contact with her whenever possible. My trainer was struggling to keep a straight face, occasionally turning away to hide his snickering. The woman's face grew redder with each passing second. She started yelling about how ridiculous this was and demanded to speak to my manager. I told her I'd be happy to call one after finishing with her items. I continued my glacial pace, watching her fume as I meticulously pressed each button on the register. When I finally announced her total, she practically threw her credit card at me. I picked it up with the same deliberate slowness, carefully inserting it into the card reader like it was my first time seeing such technology. When I asked if she wanted her receipt, she just demanded her card back. I slid both the card and receipt across the counter with a bright smile, telling her to have a magical day. She responded with some angry noises I couldn't even understand and stormed off, leaving a trail of fury in her wake. As soon as she was out of earshot, my trainer burst into laughter. He told me it was beautiful and that he'd never seen someone handle a difficult guest with such dedication to quality service. I responded that I was just following guest requests since she asked me to be thorough with her purchase. The rest of my training went much smoother, and I eventually became one of the fastest cashiers in the resort. I've been coding since I was 14. While other kids were playing video games, I was figuring out how to make them. My parents thought I was wasting my time until I landed a full scholarship to study computer science. I graduated at the top of my class and had multiple job offers before graduation, but I chose to work at a medium-sized tech company because they promised work-life balance and creative freedom. The interview process was smooth. The chief technology officer seemed impressed with my portfolio, and the human resources manager couldn't stop gushing about how my skills aligned perfectly with their needs. She went on and on about how my experience with multiple programming languages was exactly what they were looking for, emphasizing that they believed in giving their developers ample time to ensure quality work. I should have realized something was off when they mentioned their project timeframes. A basic user interface that would take any competent developer 2 weeks was allotted 3 months, but the salary was good, and I figured I could use the extra time to learn new skills. During my onboarding, I noticed other developers seemed unusually relaxed, taking long coffee breaks and spending hours in unnecessary meetings. Now I understand why. My first 6 months, I worked at my natural pace. A database integration project scheduled for 4 months, done in 3 weeks. A security update given 2 months, completed in 4 days. Each time I'd submit my work proud of my efficiency. My fellow developers started giving me strange looks, and one of them even pulled me aside to warn me about setting unrealistic expectations. I dismissed their concerns, thinking my performance would surely be rewarded. Then came my first performance review. I sat across from my project manager and the human resources manager, expecting recognition for my productivity. The project manager started by praising my work quality and noting that I'd never missed a deadline. The human resources manager chimed in, saying they were pleased with my performance and that I'd received the standard 3% raise as per my contract. The way they said it made it clear they thought they were doing me a favor. When I questioned getting just a standard raise despite completing projects months ahead of schedule, the project manager dismissed my concerns. He explained that while they appreciated my enthusiasm, they had established timelines for a reason, and rushing through projects wasn't necessarily beneficial. The condescending tone in his voice made my blood boil. That's when it clicked. They weren't interested in efficiency. They wanted predictability, even if it meant paying for months of unnecessary time. Fine by me. I spent that evening updating my resume and applying to other positions. Within a week, I landed a second job also as a software developer, but with double the salary. The interview process was refreshingly straightforward, with the new company actually valuing efficiency and quick delivery. I'd complete my projects for my first company in the usual 2 weeks, but would only submit portions of the work over their 3-month timelines. The rest of my time went to my second job, where my productivity was actually appreciated. After a year, my project manager called a meeting He tried to entice me to return to my previous productivity levels with a 15% raise offer. I politely told him I was comfortable with my current pace, pointing out that I was meeting all deadlines with high quality work. They tried again 6 months later with a 25% raise offer, then again with 30%. Each time I politely declined. The chief technology officer even pulled me aside once, expressing his confusion about what had changed since I was so productive before. I simply reminded him that I was still delivering quality work within the allocated time frames, asking if that wasn't what mattered most. His silence spoke volumes. During team meetings, I started noticing other developers adopting similar strategies. The company's attempt to maintain predictable timelines had created a culture of intentional slowdown. Several colleagues confided in me that they'd also taken on second jobs or freelance work, turning the excessive project timelines into opportunities for additional income. 4 years later, I'm still here, spending about 2 months of actual work time per year while making triple my original salary thanks to my second job. The company eventually stopped trying to change my pace, probably realizing that their initial attempt to lowball my raise had backfired spectacularly. Last month, I overheard that the human resources manager who gave me that initial review got passed over for promotion. Apparently, their department has one of the highest turnover rates in the company, with talented developers leaving for better opportunities. The few who stayed had all adopted my approach, turning their inflated timelines into profitable side gigs. What started as one person's malicious compliance had evolved into an unofficial company culture. The project manager occasionally gives me longing looks during video calls, probably remembering my previous productivity. During our last quarterly review, he hinted at upcoming organizational changes aimed at improving efficiency, but we both knew it was too late. The company's reputation in the tech community had already suffered, with potential hires often asking about the relaxed project timelines during interviews. But as far as I'm concerned, they set the pace, and I'm just following it. My second job has already promoted me twice, recognizing the value of efficient work. The company's attempt to maintain predictability had created exactly what they feared most, an unpredictable future where their best talent was only giving them a fraction of their potential. I've been a police officer for 8 years now, and I thought I had seen it all when it comes to entitled behavior. But what happened last Tuesday really takes the cake. I was doing my usual patrol downtown when I noticed a black Mercedes SUV parked right in front of a fire hydrant. The vehicle was also partially blocking a wheelchair ramp. I started writing up the ticket thinking this would be just another routine violation. While I was finishing up the ticket, I heard shouting coming from the cafe across the street. Through the window, I could see a middle-aged woman with the stereotypical "Can I speak to your manager?" haircut berating one of the baristas. She was screaming about who she was and accusing them of using almond milk instead of oat milk in her drink. When the barista explained that they had indeed used oat milk and offered to show her the carton, she became even more agitated. She started yelling about being allergic to almonds and threatening to sue the establishment. The manager tried to defuse the situation by offering to make her a new drink, but this only made her more angry. She started bragging about her husband being an important lawyer and threatening them with legal action. She stormed out of the cafe, leaving everyone inside looking shocked. When she approached her car, the illegally parked Mercedes, I could see her face turn red when she spotted the parking ticket under her windshield wiper. She let out an angry shout of disbelief when she saw the ticket. After reading it, she started looking around frantically. That's when she spotted my patrol car parked about 50 yards down the street. What happened next still seems surreal to me. She went back to her car, opened her trunk, and pulled out a tire iron. At first, I thought she was maybe having car trouble, but then she started charging toward my patrol car like a woman possessed. I yelled at her to stop, but she either didn't hear me or chose to ignore me because she kept running straight for my car, tire iron raised above her head. I identified myself as police and ordered her to drop the weapon. Instead of complying, she reached my patrol car and started smashing the back windshield while screaming incoherently about her rights and how she was going to sue everyone. Glass shattered everywhere as she kept swinging the tire iron. My partner had already called for backup, but we couldn't wait. This woman was clearly dangerous and out of control. I pulled out my taser while my partner continued giving her verbal commands to stop and drop the weapon. She was screaming about how we couldn't do this to her, bragging about how expensive her car was, and insisting that the ticket was illegal. She turned toward us, still gripping the tire iron, and that's when I deployed my taser. The probes hit her squarely in the chest, and she went down immediately, the tire iron clattering to the ground beside her. When we were putting her in handcuffs, she kept threatening to sue us, the cafe, the city, and pretty much everyone else she could think of. Then she made the mistake of trying to kick my partner while we were helping her into the back of our second patrol car that had just arrived. She started demanding to speak to our supervisor and accusing us of police brutality, all while claiming to be an upstanding citizen. When our supervisor arrived, he told her that he had reviewed the body camera footage and listed all the charges she was facing: destruction of government property, assault on a peace officer, and resisting arrest, in addition to her parking violations. She tried to protest, bringing up her husband again, but that's when our supervisor delivered the final blow. He told her that they had found 3 empty wine bottles in her vehicle and would be adding driving under the influence to her charges. Later we found out she wasn't even married to a lawyer. Her husband was an accountant who filed for divorce 2 weeks earlier. She ended up getting charged with multiple felonies, lost her driver's license, and had to pay for all the damages to the patrol car. The cafe staff also pressed charges for harassment and disturbing the peace. The drink she was complaining about actually was made with oat milk, just like she asked. The cafe had security footage proving it. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.